Hello, everybody, and welcome to this BCMA webinar, which is being presented by Sean Gray. Really nice to see you all, and I'm going to hand over to Sean.
Okay, Colleen, I'm just going to welcome everybody. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming. I'm just going to put my PowerPoint up.
Okay.
Now I need to be able to share that, Colleen, don't I?
Yeah, you need to hit the green share button at the bottom.
Now I go to my PowerPoint.
And there we go.
Okay, okay, can everyone see that now?
We've got a blank screen at the moment, a blue screen.
Okay.
There we go. So, you've started it. Perfect.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone. Welcome and thank you for coming. Today, a little bit about myself. I'm Sean Gray. I'm a performance coach for the difference. I suppose that's a bit of a title, but the difference is I help people knock down any emotional, physical barriers that get in their way of success. So I've probably done that for quite a few years now, and the reason that I'm able to do that, perhaps, and what the difference is the technique I use. I use a technique called EFT, which is Emotional Freedom Technique. I'll actually talk about that a little later, but it's an incredible technique that can release stress, anxiety, negative thinking, and release limiting beliefs quite often in minutes. So I think that's really the key to what makes a difference. And what I want to be able to do today is be able to share this with you, my experience, and then the topic's going to be New Year's resolutions. And I suppose really I want to be able to help you, if you're somebody who's used resolutions and been failing, I want to help you maybe make those steps. So, okay. So here we go, New Year's resolution. Oh, stick a cork in it. So, new year, new me, probably not. I suppose we look at this little fella at the bottom of the stairs. Perhaps maybe that's sorry about this a moment. Let me just see if I can remove that. Sorry about this little technical bit here. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Little technical issue there. Let's come back to that one. All right, New Year's resolution, stick a cork in it. Like I said, new year, new me, probably not. I suppose really this little fella at the bottom of the stairs, this is maybe 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in. It's quite often that people reach a stage, I don't know if this is you kind of look at those stairs and think, I want to go forward, but I can't. What I want to be able to do and show you today is to be able to get up those stairs. Studies show 80% of people give up by the end of January. Common resolutions include losing weight, exercise, cut down on drinking, give up smoking. If you look at reasons why possibly people fail, it tends to do with, just in my experience really, perhaps being overwhelmed, unrealistic goals, probably being negative with themselves, and one of the big things is actually the underlying sabotage that happens. A lot of this is actually sort of dealing with cravings, which I'm going to help you deal with today. Losing weight's a quite common one. There's so many aspects to losing weight really, just in my experience. There's the why is it that we tend to eat too much when we're full? Underlying things could be things like that you actually probably had a hard day, want to be able to have something to eat. A lot of it's about comfort eating, eating foods that are probably not good for you. And even though you've got quite a lot of, you feel like you've got a willpower, or it's very difficult to be able to lose weight. So today I'm going to show you some things that we can deal with that. Exercise is probably the same. I'm sure a lot of people want to be able to exercise. It's a really big thing. But one of the big things is actually the set unrealistic targets, which would probably be, I want to do X amount of maybe 4 or 5 times a week, or and what tends to happen is with the exercise, and maybe the exercise itself is probably maybe a little too intense, and then after a few weeks you find that you haven't done your original goal of 4 or 5 times a week, and then what tends to happen is it's quite easy for people to give up. Cut down on drinking, obviously that's a really big one as well. One of the things I find that I'd like to be able to help people with is not be so extreme with it. Try and sort of go through a simple plan, and something like cut down on drinking is maybe just to be able to have it under control, feel like you want to drink because you want the pleasure of it, but not drink because you feel as though maybe you need to. Obviously with giving up smoking is such a big thing, and I'm stating the obvious, but having worked with people over the years with giving up smoking, there are so many underlying challenges really that what they call secondary benefit. Even though it's well known how bad it is for your health smoking, there's so many different aspects to it. What am I going to do with my hands? You know, if I'm not smoking, am I going to lose my friends? Also with smoking, there tends to be the fact that people do it when they go out and socialize, they go out and have a drink, people sort of smoke. So there's quite a lot of underlying sort of aspects really that could hold people back. One of the things that I want to be able to, through the session today, to make it kind of proactive is if anybody can relate to some of these resolutions and they would like to do, I'm going to tap on cravings. I'm actually going to show you how we can tap on cravings, which will help you, and all of them really, lose weight, exercise, cut down on drinking and smoking. So that's maybe something to have a think of, that when we go on to maybe the next 2 stages, I'd like if anybody wanted to do a demonstration, that we can all actually join in. I can work on one-to-one with someone, and then everyone else can sort of join in just to sort of maybe do this, what we call tapping. So, I mean, how I can help. Basically, there's three simple steps. I don't know if you can see my image of the tapping points. Maybe I ought to sort of talk perhaps a little bit about EFT now. EFT is a form of acupuncture without needles. Basically, tap on the body's energy points whilst focusing on an emotional or physical challenge, and this releases stress from the body. It's actually there was something called TFT, which is thought field therapy, and there was someone called Roger Callahan. He actually invented TFT. And he was a psychologist that basically had quite he was frustrated with some of the progress that some of his clients basically weren't making. One of them in particular was Mary. She had a fear of water. And it was so intense that she basically couldn't go out in the rain. And he'd seen her for a couple of years and he didn't really get much progress with her. And he spoke to his colleagues and they said, look, you know, you're probably the best help that she can get. And he thought there should be another way. And he'd studied the body's, basically the body's acupressure points. And what he realized was that if you tap under the eye, this is connected to the stomach. So when he spoke to Mary, he said, when you feel, when you have this fear about water, where do you feel it? She said, I feel it in my stomach. So he actually got her to tap under the eye. And legend has it that she went to a swimming pool, which I suppose in America, you know, maybe a lot of people have, and she splashed water in her face. So he was astonished at this, and he went on and developed this TFT. But one of the challenges with TFT was the fact that thought field therapy, you had to be quite diagnostic with it. If you're working with a phobia or physical pain, you had to know on what part of the body to tap. So someone called Gary Craig came along, and he was an engineer, and he'd heard about this, and he thought, this is amazing. And so he spoke to about this, and And what he thought was, this is great, but it's too complicated. So basically develop a system where if you work on phobias or fears or physical pain, it could be anything really, basically. What you do is you use the same energy points. And so what it means is you don't have to have the diagnostic sort of side of it, and you can help. And that was EFT. So if you look at 3 simple steps, if we're going to work on what we talked about today, the first thing to do is maybe identify the problem. If it's maybe something like perhaps overeating, self-sabotage, feeling overwhelmed, what you do is you identify for the moment why is it you can't stop eating. It could be quite simply some of the favorite foods that you find yourself, even though you know you shouldn't, you basically eat. And so from an EFT perspective, if in the sabotage sense, if it is that you basically find yourself eating these foods when you feel like you shouldn't, what tends to happen is that there's basically a resistance, or in EFT terms, the energy system becomes blocked. So what you do by simply with EFT is you focus on these points through the body, and you just tap through. And what that does is actually clear the resistance. And then what tends to happen is that the energy starts to flow through the body, what they call chi, and also your mind becomes calmer, you become clearer, and it actually helps with all kinds of things, especially with cravings. And then because your mind's clearer, I suppose one of the other things that I found over time is that people tend to stress and anxiety is quite a big thing, like I talked early on about, and that puts the body in fight or flight mode. So one of the things that tends to happen in fight or flight, that there's a tendency not to be able to think straight. And so basically when you kind of clear the resistance and release, give the body's nervous system a bit of rest with the tapping, the mind's actually sort of clearer to be able to reprogram and basically how you want to feel. So I think all my years through working with performance, helping people with, initially I used to work with musicians that had stage fright, or basically sportsmen that were struggling, and then I went into schools and helped students with exam stress. And where I am at the moment, I actually help, I work at Breast Cancer Haven, and I help visitors to the centre deal with the emotional fallout of having cancer. So, and especially even at that extreme situation, it's not so much about where you are, but it's also where you want to be. So if you are someone who's identified with any of the problems we've said above, really, I'd like to be able to demonstrate and maybe just sort of help working with cravings. So Colleen, at the moment, would we sort of put that out there and say if anybody wants to work with that I can demonstrate with, you think?
Yes, Sean, I think it might be a good idea if you stop your sharing for a minute.
Okay,
so
yeah.
that everybody can come up.
Okay, yeah.
And now I'll unmute everybody so that we can come on. Okay, I muted Mike. Okay, so yes. So Sean, you can see everybody now, and everybody can respond if you ask them questions. So
the initial question is that from what we talked about with the if you find in your own life that maybe the New Year resolutions that something's getting in the way, and perhaps what I wanted to maybe do is maybe give an example of how it can work with cravings. You know, if it's with weight, it's with chocolate, or your favorite food you biscuits that you eat to find the balance. Would anybody like to sort of come forward and do a demonstration?
I'll do it, Sean.
Yeah, Mike, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks, Mike. What I can do is I'll demonstrate with Mike, and everyone else, if you don't mind, you can kind of join in if you like. Just for the thing with EFT. If you haven't seen it before, it's actually it looks a bit odd. Basically, it can look a bit weird. It's incredibly effective. So maybe Mike, with just an example of, how about yourself? Is there anything in particular you feel as though you'd like to help with, in the New Year's resolution, or to do with cravings maybe or anything else?
Yeah, I'd like to lose some weight, and well, a fair amount of weight, I guess. And I think there are two things. There is alcohol and eating.
Alcohol and eating. Okay. So which is the would you, out of the two, is there one that you feel is you like first?
I think the if I drank less, then I'd probably eat less too.
Okay.
So I tend to snack when I've had a couple of drinks.
Okay. So basically, maybe with the alcohol, if you felt as though you could work with that, it would have a knock-on effect.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll demonstrate with Mike basically how you can work on a craving, especially with drinking. So one of the things is it's and it works with cigarettes and anything really. So Mike, what I'm going to ask you for, is there any particular time that you would have a drink, that you'd really fancy a drink? You know, the night time. Is there any particular day, or so that if I asked you now, which was the time when you're more likely to drink, when perhaps you don't really want to?
I would say it's definitely at the end of the day, and there's a release having finished work.
Okay.
I'm working quite hard at the moment, so.
Okay, so end of the day, finish work. Any particular day that's worse, if you like?
No.
Okay.
It just varies by day.
Varies by day. Okay, so imagine. Tell me what normally happens. So do you normally have something to drink, or do you what kind? Did you have a particular wine that you like?
I like a red.
A red, yeah. Okay. And is there any particular sort of time after work where you really feel like that you like that wine?
I think there's I know this sounds silly, but shortly after, I think it's part of my. I've adopted it as a kind of a step down from the day.
So literally, just finish work, you find yourself having a
sort of a deep breath, and then might go for a walk or something. But I'll probably come back and have some wine at the end of that.
Okay. And just out of interest, what particular snack would you have? Your favourite snack, if you're having wine?
I try and I have probably something with a kind of a cracker or something like, but I'm not talking about one or two. I'd probably I feel hungry again after, and you sit up. If you sit up and you drink, it probably keeps you awake rather than sends you to sleep. So
yes,
you're up
and
late.
But you can't help it. Okay, so what would if I could just explain around this before we do some tapping. This works with food. It actually works for smoking as well. What you do is you actually will ask someone you test their craving basically. So I've asked Mike about where's the most intense time, and for yourselves actually, I don't know if you can relate to something. You can join in if you like. Even though I'm sort of tapping with Mike, is there anything part of the day that you feel as though you eat when you don't want to? Test just the worst time, maybe at night after work, a hard day's work. Could be something to eat, it could be something to drink. And what I'm going to ask Mike now is I'm going to test his craving, how much he wants it. Now, what you can do, obviously, maybe more on a one-to-one, I could do it now, but how much do you feel as though, like you finish work, it's been a tough day at work, you've gone for a walk, you come back, how much do you feel as though out of 10 do you feel as though you want that wine? Now, if you really wanted it, it would be a kind of 8 or 9. Not just now thinking about it. How much would the craving be, do you think?
I would definitely want it. I guess I've made it a bit of a habit. I'd. So how much would I want it? To answer your question, 7 or 8, I would say.
7 or 8, okay. And 7 or 8, it's your favorite thing of wine. What we're going to do now is I'm going to go through. So anyone else, I don't know if you can test your own craving. If if it's wine or if it's anything else or if it's food. Now I'm going to. I don't know if you could write it down or just think about it. Now I'm going to tap with Mike now on the craving, and what we want to do, I'm then going to come back in and check with him. and we want to see that the craving actually drops. And the idea is, this actually, by tapping, something physiologically with the hormones actually happens when we tap. You know, so there's sort of messages cascade down through the body. And there's something called serotonin in your in the system that basically it's a false high, if you like. If you have that wine, you feel like you need it, you have this high. And you basically have it, but the problem is then it's a bit of a crash. So then you crave it again, you want the high again, and that's why your system's out of order. So with something like tapping, hopefully what it can do, it can stop the triggers so much. You know, I suppose you've got to work with it a little bit, but it is a tool to use to actually help you do something you probably don't really want to do as much, maybe. So before we actually start, just out of interest, how would you like to feel? Would you just like to feel you could, you know, doesn't mean you're going to stop drinking wine, but you could just do it more by choice, do you think?
Yeah, maybe just well, like I say, I haven't set it as a New Year's resolution, but should have done, and I think this would help give me more to another tool to work with.
Okay, all right. So now, basically,
just hang on one sec. I'm sorry to.
That's okay. Okay.
Apologies, hungry family, and I've eaten. They were just checking that I had.
Okay. All right. So what we're going to do now, so everybody, if you don't mind following me now, I'm going to show you the tapping points. So, well, basically, if everybody starts, it looks a bit odd, like as I say, if you've never done it before, but tap on the top of the head with your fingers, and everyone can join in if you like. You don't have to, but it would help. These are acupuncture points. And then you go to the inside of the eye, like here. This is almost coming back to that diagram. Inside of the eye, and then the outside of the eye. So these are meridian points that lie underneath the surface, and then underneath the eye. And then underneath the eye, Mike, that one there. That's it. And then in between the nose, top lip, and then the chin. And then with the flat of your hand, the collarbone. So it's like where the bony bit is with your fingers. That's it. Just where the that's it. Just tap with the flat of the hand. And then underneath the arm, about 4 inches underneath the arm. Okay, good. And then we go back and then do it once more. Top of the head. And then inside the eye. Outside the eye. Because what's happening basically, when you feel like you eat or you drink, and then just follow me through underneath the eye, that disruption happens in your energy system. And just by tapping on these points, it helps clear it. And then release that kind of sabotage on the chin, collarbone point, and then underneath the arm. Okay, and then take a deep breath. So, okay, now I showed you that first of all, because that's tapping points. You don't have to know too much about it, and you can just sit there and do that, and that's a bit of a beginning. But what I want to do, I'm not going to do too much about it, but I'm going to do what they call a setup phrase, where this basically, it's the three-step process. So we say, even though I have this problem, I accept myself. So even though the problem could be, even though I drink when I don't want to, even though I eat food when I'm not hungry, even though I'm not feeling great, and actually it works on physical pain as well. So we do a setup phrase. We say, even though I have this problem, and the problem is probably drinking when I don't really want to and eating, I accept myself. Acceptance seems to be a positive on it. And then we tap through reminding ourselves of the problem. And we'll talk about this craving, even though I have this craving. You don't have to say it, I'll say it. And if you just listen to it, we're going to tap through. Then I'm going to ask you again how you feel. Okay? You okay to do it, Mike? So,
yeah.
Don't like karate chop. Like I said, you don't have to say anything. I'll say it. So even though I have this craving for this wine. I don't particularly want to drink it all the time. I can't help it. And then I eat as well. I eat those crackers. And I don't feel good after, but I can't stop it. So even though I have this craving, I got my favorite bit of wine. I go for a walk, I come home, And then I'll have a bit of wine, then I have some crackers. I'll eat them even though I'm not hungry. But I accept myself for having these cravings. So even though I have this craving, I don't know why I've got it. I don't particularly want to drink the wine, but I've had a hard day at work, but I've got this craving. And then we tap it through and we remind ourselves of the problem. I've got this craving. And then through the points, come home after work and have a glass of wine. I'd like to do it more by choice, underneath the eye. But at the moment, when I drink, I'll then have some crackers. I don't really need. I'd like to be free of this craving. And then collarbone, free of this craving. It's not healthy. Okay, and then take a deep breath. Okay, so now I'm gonna test you now, Mike, because it's very EFT this. You know, we start off on a number, and then I'm going to ask you about, you come home from work, it's a bit of a stressful time. You know, you're reaching for your favorite red wine, and I just want to ask you about the number. How does it feel? Does it still feel the same?
No, I feel a bit more calm.
Yeah, I think it's okay if you do. It's quite common when people tap, they feel calmer, lighter. But what it does physically, it actually tends to adjust those hormones. That's sort of when you find yourself, which is when you find yourself doing things and willpower isn't enough. This is very good for sort of really striking a bit of a balance. And then if you do it, so what you do is you can do it persistently. And it gets to the stage actually when you probably don't want that glass of wine. It doesn't mean that EFT doesn't take away, how can I say, the treats in life. Like if you do it on chocolate, you can still eat chocolate, but maybe feel like a little bit more control. So, okay. Are we okay just to do one more round and then I can come back in? All right, so what we're going to do now, I'll tap another round and I'll just say, I've still got the craving. Because it's on a number, would it be, what do you think, Mike? It was 7 or 8, what would it be now, do you think?
Oh, 5 or 6.
5 or 6,
lower.
Okay. Right, so we'll just...
I think I feel less stressed because I finished work only a few minutes ago, and it's...
And I think that's the other aspect to it in many ways. It's just good with stress and anxiety, because what it does, it gives you, it actually gives your body's nervous system a rest. That fight or flight thing or stress. I suppose in a sense it's almost a relaxation technique, but it's something you can do and you don't really think about it. It's very subtle, but it's quite powerful and pretty gentle as well. So let's maybe just do one more round, okay? So we tap on the carotid shock point and we say, even though I still have this craving, not as much as I did for that wine, I'd like to be free of this craving. So even though I still have this craving for the wine, I do feel lighter, calmer. Maybe I don't need the wine tonight. So even though I still have this craving, what if I could be free of that craving? It's not helping. And then we tap it through. I'd like to find a balance. I'm open to finding a balance in my life. Come home from work, it doesn't matter how hard I've worked. Maybe I can use this tool just to relax me. And then I can make a decision with a clearer head. If I want some wine, so be it. If I don't want wine, maybe each night, well, that's fine. I can save it for maybe on the weekend, whatever. So I'm open to change. Even though I've had these cravings probably for a long time, because I'm stressed, and it's a way of releasing that stress. But maybe it's not as healthy as it could be. So I'm open to change. I'm open to finding a way of releasing the stress that I have after work. Feel calm, lighter. And if I want to drink, so be it. But if I don't, I can just leave it easily. That's what I choose. Okay. And then take a deep breath. Okay, so again, that probably builds on a bit. So how does it feel now, Mike, the idea of having that drink? Test it, you've had a hard day at work.
Better. Better.
Do you still feel as though you'd have that drink, do you think? Or?
I'm not sure. It's just being really honest.
No, I'm not sure. And I think part of it is because it's strange. I mean, you've probably never done anything like this in many ways. And it's sometimes when you ask people, what it tends to do is something that was very intense all of a sudden doesn't become so tense. So it's in many ways, but it's definitely that kind of lighter. And so what you do in many ways, especially if you did a one-to-one, you just work on it probably a little bit more. I could even test you with your wine in a sense. And then you get, because the idea is that you've got less chance of being triggered. I suppose that's the logic behind it.
Hmm.
So it's something you just build into your routine in a way. But of course, it's I'd like to think it's a healthy option. Yeah.
So the first thing to do really after work would be the tapping, partly from a stress release viewpoint, but also with the affirmations for what's going to positively happen.
Yeah, I think it seems to be that the like you said, you finish work. The best thing to do really with a simple technique like this is use it with the affirmations and actually say about the craving. Keep it simple. You know, I've got this crave. Test yourself. How much do I want that drink? And then tap through maybe the rounds that I did earlier. And then I won't expect you to remember it, but it's something that afterwards I can offer. People can, if they want to know a tapping script, I can send it out to them. And then but the big thing, what it does in life tends to take you back in control of your life, really. Because stress is the thing that's controlling your life, maybe, and it tends to result, it could be food and wine. But then what you probably start to think and then you can access the problem-solving creative side of you, and that means that you can make more decisions. So it's almost like you start to get back control, rather than just relying on probably willpower, because it's almost like your kind of centers are being hijacked by something like, you know, like cravings in many ways. It's almost out of your control. So this deals with it directly. Right. Okay. So, all right. Well, thanks for that, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, okay. I think, Colleen, what would I do now? Do I go back to the chat? I go back to the share now, don't I? Okay.
You can hear me now. You can go back. You can go back to your.
Okay. All right. Lovely. Thanks. Okay. So hopefully you found that helpful. It was, and as I say, it's actually that they call it. Even though I was working with Mike on basically with the drinking, you can do it in a group session. They call it borrow benefits with EFT. I've worked in groups that basically. We're kind of working on anything actually. I've actually done a breast cancer haven when I sort of take some of the welcome days. There's probably about eight people there, and they've obviously all got different kind of challenges in life at different stages. But you can actually work on someone, and then normally I've got actually a worksheet that people can write down themselves, whatever your particular challenge at that moment, and then we can tap. As long as you've written it down, your subconscious knows it's there. And you can still get released within a group. Really. It's obviously more powerful in a one-to-one. But so that's a sort of almost like the 3 simple steps. I mean, if I had just a few more slides, weight loss, what's getting in the way of losing weight? Tapping on cravings helps to release the underlying reasons why people eat more than they need. I mean, hopefully I kind of demonstrated a little bit of that. And it would be the same as if I was working with somebody who basically eats too much or eats when they don't want to. I'd ask them, when's your favorite time of the day? Or actually, what's your favorite food? It could be something like a takeaway. And I'd say to you, look, what's a time in the week when you feel as though you want to eat that? It might be a Friday night after work. And then you do the same thing. You scale the craving and then you sort of tap on it to release it. It could work with anything, biscuits, anything you feel like is getting in the way. This one, I don't know if you can see this is taking exercise. I don't know if you've seen the warning sign on the right. Exercise has been known to cause health and happiness. There you go. So it's because I come from that sort of sporty background, I suppose, performance background in many ways. I think sometimes it's easier for me because I was almost like a professional athlete, I suppose, in a way. So exercise was part of my life, but I do find that even things like movement can be a good thing. It doesn't have to be exercise, just going for a walk. I think some of the things that I found that people come up with, interesting to see what you think. I don't like it. I've never been able to keep it up before. I can't afford to exercise, go to a gym. I haven't got the time. There's actually something I've got in my notes. When I started to when I started to look into it, especially maybe for my PowerPoint, like I said, I'm a trained physical training instructor, tennis coach. I mean, I've been in sport all my life, really, in many ways. And I've looked at lots of different exercises, and it's really interesting. One of the things that sort of came to me, there's a book I read years ago. It was one of the first books, and it was called, it was Get Fit in 30 Minutes a Week. Now, it's just something that stuck in my mind. I can't quite remember. I remember what the book looked like. I've looked it up on Amazon, actually. And the person who wrote it is actually Lawrence Morehouse. And his basic idea is if you cut down a little bit on, logical, isn't it? Cut down a little bit on eating and did more exercise, you'd be fitter. And I suppose in a way, the important thing is if you were able to do that over a long term, even if you did it in a relatively small portions, and if things like cut down a little bit on eating, maybe using the tapping on the cravings, and actually take the stairs or do something else in your life, or anything else, hopefully, that you might enjoy, even dancing or go out for a walk. But if you're able to keep it up, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 months time, the chances are you definitely see a difference. Now this Lawrence Morehouse, when I looked into it, he actually he designed a fitness program for the NASA astronauts. So in many ways, even though it sounds a bit simplistic, he seems to know what he was talking about. And I've actually got, if you want to, at the end of it, I've got a link to his book on Amazon, and you can get it for about a penny. I know you've got to pay for post if anyone's interested, but you've got to pay postage and packing probably. But that would be a really good thing to get. Okay, so I think the other thing with exercise, I think there's a tendency, and I'm generalizing, people definitely just sort of set too high goals. I'm going to exercise X amount of times a week. You've got to set yourself a lower target. That's what I feel. Even if it was, I don't know, 2, 3 times a week. And then, because what's going to happen through your life, things come up, you get tired in work, you're not feeling very well. It's quite possible if you set such a too high a target and you don't do the 4 times a week, what's going to happen is you're going to end up being part of the 80%, like that little boy at the looking at the steps, not being able to do it anymore. So if you set yourself a really low target, and if you do more in the week, that's great. So, okay, and this is the final bit really. New year, new me. Why not maybe? I suppose some of the key things perhaps are, I suppose really, if you're going to set goals, just sort of set the goal. Maybe just do, instead of many, maybe just choose one. Make it easy. Be patient, easy on yourself, and I suppose ideally enjoy the journey. So really, that's kind of the sort of the end of my slides in many ways, and I'm going to ask maybe for questions in a moment if there are any. But what I'd like to offer, in a sense, before I sort of go on to the next step, is that I'd like to offer 20% anybody here who wanted to have a one-to-one session. I do one-to-one sessions on literally in person, but I can do it on Skype. Actually, FaceTime seems pretty good if someone's got an iPhone. That's really good. But I've also got an ebook on freedom from exam stress, which has is basically got a tapping script, and in the tapping script, it's a book. It's got things on overwhelm, perfectionism, public speaking. It's got a whole load of things, procrastination. I've got the book. It's got audio downloads, and it's also got a video, which basically takes you through the process. So that I kind of offer, and I think this information will come up after. There's a code you can put in. You can get it basically 50% off. Really. A tapping script, if anybody wants it, I'll actually produce a tapping script that I'll send off to anyone who literally would like it, and you can adapt it to yourself. And also, like I said, that book by Lawrence really on Amazon. Like I said, you can get it for £1, but I think some of them you can get for a penny. So okay, so I suppose now I'd like to sort of any questions really. If we could go back to the stuff. Have a look. Yeah. So Colleen, do you think that would be, if I could open it up, if there were any questions really?
You'd look to, talking personally, introduce that as part of a routine within the day in order to provide that lift, if you like, and intervention.
Yeah, I think the thing is, Mike, it's something that, it's like anything, isn't it? The more you use it, the routine, it's a very simple routine. And I think what would happen, from my experience, what would happen if you start to sort of do the tapping in general terms, it starts to clear the pathways a lot easier. And you seem to get, I'd always expect to see a change. I think the thing is, it doesn't work for everyone. But those it does work for, you actually expect to see a change. So you could use it in the morning as a way of, and I focused on the negative, but because I come from that performance background, you can use it for anything. I've worked for, tennis players who become, like one of them was a junior Welsh champion, sort of, so it's very much, and because it's something that you can use, once you kind of tap on the negative, when you get used to it, you then introduce the positive. And yes, so a routine would be a good thing. So immediately for the cravings, perhaps, but then you can introduce it. There's so much to it. It's just a start with it.
Thank you.
It's okay. So, anyone else?
Can I ask?
Hi.
Hello to you. Just the specifics. You're tapping on the top of your head, but you're on the right side, and then you swap to the left side. And in the diagram, it looked as though it was all on the same side.
Okay, man. That's a really good point. The thing is with that, and that's why it's great to have a question like that, because basically, if you look at the, I don't know, what are they, 3,000-year-old diagrams of acupuncture, you'll see the actual, it's incredible, isn't it? You'll see the
meridians and things, yeah.
The meridians. So with something like EFT, it's on both sides of the body. So so basically, you can tap on either side. You can tap on both sides.
Right.
It doesn't really matter, and it's very forgiving. You can't get it wrong. So you can tap on both sides of the body if you like, and it's about 5 or 7 times, just a light pressure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Sean.
Yeah.
You have finger points as well, or hand points.
Oh yes, Conchita. That's you mean the finger points?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, that's a really good point. I mean, one of the things I found, especially through my life, I've worked with musicians who've got stage fright, students taking exams. You can imagine a professional musician going on stage saying, "I'm feeling great," but you look a bit odd tapping and it doesn't really work. So what you can do is, Conchita said, you can use the points. It's on your finger, the nail. It's actually sort of where your thumb is. I don't know if you can see that. You tap. There's a meridian point by the nail on the side of the finger, and then you go on and tap another point. You can actually do it with your thumb. So you tap a point, and then you go on to the other one. So that's a meridian point. Now that sends a calming message to your brain. So if you think about it, if you're a musician going on stage, you can use this. I work with, as I say, people who've got breast cancer. Before they go to, maybe they've got to go for a consultation and they're pretty stressed, they'll actually tap their fingers in the waiting room. People taking their driving test, exams, it's great for students with exams. And with this one, again, you can do both things at the same time. You can walk down the street doing it. So it's what they call, that's it, Conchita. It's very, very, it's very subtle, but it's very effective. You don't actually have to think about anything there. That's what they call energy toning. It just actually, and all you're doing all the time is flushing through the energy system. So if you're feeling stressed or anxious or physical pain, your energy system's blocked. So basically, just by actually doing these points, it tends to free it. And that's why people feel calmer and more lighter, really. So thanks for that, Conchita. That's a great point. Anything else?
Can I just clarify then? So, you said about the finger points.
Mm-hmm.
That's just with the thumb on the inside of each.
Yeah, if you like
the fingernail.
Yeah, the fingernail. That's it. As long as you've got the side of the fingernail, like you're doing.
Yes.
That's a meridian point.
Right.
So it's literally the side where the side of the nail. So when you tap it, it sends chemicals cascading down really to the brain, just sort of calmer messages. So as people find that really helpful for all kinds of reasons. But of course, it's very subtle and no one knows you're doing it. I do it when I go to the dentist, actually. That's my favorite thing. He says to me, put your hands up if there's a problem. But I don't think, and I'm tapping my finger, I'm always wondering if he thinks I'm putting my hand up. But basically, I find it really helpful. tapping the finger. Anyone else?
And sorry, Sean.
That's okay.
And as you're doing that, you would reinforce that with like positive affirmation, or like, for example, what do you say to yourself when you go to the dentist?
Yeah, well, actually, that's a good point. When I go to the dentist, I don't actually say anything. I trust the fact that actually just by tapping that, it just literally helps keep me calm.
Right.
But in general, with tapping points, one of the things that tends to happen is we start with the negative, because if people are feeling, I see a lot of people who emotionally are basically full up. You know, they give them that idea about spinning plates. Actually, most of them are ladies. I suppose I'm talking about the Haven. I haven't seen any men there, but most of them are mothers and grandmothers and used to being in control. And I suppose what tends to happen is, especially when they have something like cancer, that it's like giving them one too many plates to spin. They lose control. So I suppose in a sense, if you try and start off by being positive with something like in that situation, that they're permanently in fight or flight, and the brain doesn't take it. There's no room for it, because it's basically. But when you tap initially on the negative, you look to release the stress and get some sort of empty the bottle a little bit and have some clarity in the head. And then that's why you start off on the negative, but towards the end, maybe when the number drops between a 5, you put in the positive. Even though I feel like this, I want to change the way I feel. I want to feel calm, peaceful. So basically, I suppose, coming back to that, you could actually, whatever you like really, if you want to do a positive affirmation, do it. But if you're feeling negative initially, it's better to work on the negative first of all. So you can
first. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
anyone else?
Just a cheeky one, Sean. I've got a daughter gets very she's almost paralyzed sometimes when she's going in for exams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think that sounds quite powerful, because she's taken in blue tack and other things to play with before, but this is a more positive release, I guess.
I think the thing is, Mike, from my experience, and I suppose because of the nature of my work, I work a lot with the underlying reason why people have stress. And probably your daughter's quite a good example. That one of the problems where people get, because this works with panic attacks and overwhelm, because
Does it? Right, okay.
because it normally comes from somewhere. The tendency is she's probably felt like this for a little while.
Yeah.
So she might have had I'm not saying, just as an example, I work with students, especially when I was working in a school, that have had a bad experience in the exam when they froze, or they basically, or maybe some of the more, sometimes you get the things like the fear of failure, fear of letting yourself down, letting teachers down, these are things that sort of tend to trigger the fight or flight. And they don't realize it, but then they're becoming really stressed.
Yeah.
And especially if they're really good pupils and the expectation is high, that in itself can work against them. So what tends to happen is I would work on, it would work hopefully just on them at the moment, but I would work on, see if there's anything from the past. Especially when I've worked with some of the students who are incredibly stressed. And when you work with them, you tend to find it started somewhere else. You know, they may be, one of the girls actually who was one of the best pupils in a school. This happens with musicians and sports people as well, as you can imagine. In junior school, when she went to secondary school, she felt the pressure that the teacher and all her friends expected her to do well. So even though she sort of would actually sort of study as well as she could, she was stressed in the study. She couldn't study as well as she could. Then she started to panic about the exams. So there's often quite a few things that are underlined. And it's just an underlying program that runs it. Sometimes it develops faults. The great thing is with something like EFT, it can release those faults, which might be, it sounds incredible, it might be trauma stored in the body from experiences, and then you can reprogram it, especially with performance psychology.
So it is a sort of neurolinguistic as well, really, because you... Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a good point, Matt. I think it is EFT, but I suppose I brought to my performance side of it. And affirmations are a really big thing. What I tend to find is, it's like I say about the exam stress book that I've got. I've got audios, and they're audios that are on perfectionism and basically anything that students can have and they can sort of tap on themselves, but they have, rather than think about the circumstance, I actually talk them through it. So yeah, so I think affirmations are a really big part of it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Great questions. So, you know, it's great to have some questions, because I think, especially from my point with something like EFT, there's so much to it, and it's because it's very new. You can imagine if I do sessions with people, most people haven't heard of it. So really, to have a chance to be able to do something like this and to go into greater depth with it about the different things, all the questions is great, especially for someone like myself. So, yeah, so I thank you for that, really. Okay, so no more questions, I think?
Not from me.
Not from me.
Okay.
I would like to could I just ask one more question?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
It's going a little bit further. In the exams, it's not exact. It's concerning the same sort of anxiety, and it's to do with my daughter, I'm afraid, again. But she has a paralysis when she does essays. How do you undo that? And could EFT? I mean, if it helps exams, it would obviously help.
Sorry,
with
did
the
you
paralysis.
say?
Sorry, Sean?
Amanda, did you say with essays? She has a paralysis?
Yes, it's actually in writing an essay.
Okay. The thing is, from with my experience, and I'm only saying that I've had quite a lot of experience, really, especially with a lot of pupils. What tends to happen is it normally starts somewhere. It's about, if I was working with her, it would basically be a case of, I'd ask her, have you always felt like this? Just out of interest. And so what tends to happen is with people, they haven't always felt like it. There's often there's normally a time in their life where something happens.
Yeah.
And that could be, I mean, the example of, some of the students I work with, that basically with exams, that one of them actually went blank in an exam. She always worried that she was going to go blank again. So we worked on, I'd take her back to that time, a bit like I said to Mike about imagine that time when you want your wine, and how much do you want it? Well, I'd sort of, if it was your daughter, I'd speak to her about a time where, did it happen some other time? And she might tell me that, I was in a classroom this time. Could be any time ago, and this is what happened. Now, for me, that carries like a negative vibration. It's like a negative tree in a forest. So she's got that within her mind and body. Yes. And what tends to happen is she might have another bad experience, and then all of a sudden she's got this sort of vibration that's joining up, and that adds to the paralysis. Sometimes she might think, oh gosh, I don't feel too bad, but I feel almost paralyzed by it. But it's a combination of all these sort of experiences that she might have had in her life. So what you do with EFT is you go back to a time and you ask them about it, and they can tell you about how she felt on the time. Like if I asked her about a time earlier on when she struggled with it, she'd probably tell me, she'd probably feel stressed when I was asking her about it. So when you tap on it on that time, what you do is you lower the stress level so she can talk about it comfortably and want to move on. And what happens is she then has less chance of being triggered. But if you don't deal with it, it may I don't know. Well, it's quite common for it to keep going, and sometimes it gets worse. Yes. It's like a musician on stage. If they've got stage fright, when I worked first with a professional musician, she 27 years a musician, 25 years she suffered with stage fright. And when I first worked with her, and we sort of tapped on a few things, it's very much like peeling an onion. Things tend to come up that you're not aware of because it's very releasing. And with her, what happened to her, she said, I remember now, because she had sort of social anxiety as well, that I was 14 and I was in class and the teacher asked me to read an essay. She stood up and read it, and the teacher said to her, that's rubbish. I sat down. From that day, that was a bit of a tree with her. And then, of course, she went on, she froze on stage, she started getting stage fright. So I don't know if that's a good example. So even though it's a musician, it's no different to me, to a person, young or old, who's going through a performance issue.
Yeah, and that's understandable. But is it necessary for them to go through it with someone else? It's not something you can deal with yourself through EFT.
You mean with yourself doing it?
Yes. Yeah. If my daughter had these tapping points that she could do with herself, would that help her, or does she need to?
It can help her, but I suppose the key, it depends how severe it is in many ways. I think how much of a challenge. Because also, how old is she, just out of interest?
20.
All right. So,
Is it university?
you know, well, so my daughter's gone through university, so I kind of understand the. And the thing is, I'm only saying it's better to work with someone like myself initially because I understand. I get to the challenge earlier on, and you've got to be. It helps if you're specific, you know, because it's almost like, for me, it's like detective work. I'll speak to someone because I've seen so much of it. I'll ask her a question, let's say. I don't know, but just generally, and then I'll know where to go next. And then what you do, you've got a much better chance of release. So you can get partial release, but you know, even if you have a chance to work with someone like myself, you can kind of get a good grounding, and then she can do it herself. But rather than get some, I'm not saying you won't get a grade, but I suppose in a way, I would expect to get a bigger shift.
Yes.
Initially, and that's the way it works really. And then hopefully it's something you can use through a life.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So, any other questions?
Not for me.
Anybody else?
No, not mine, thank you.
So, Sean, have you got anything else to add?
No, I mean, I think it was great for me actually. Just all the questions really helped. They really, because I hope that they help others as well. And it was lovely for me to have an opportunity to talk about this. But no, I'm really grateful to have been able to come, and I hope I've sort of helped some people. But I would like to, if there was more interest, I can, like I said, I can send a tapping script, or like I said, I know I wrote it, but that book on exam stress is pretty comprehensive in many ways, and you'll see it from. But yeah, but the important thing is there's real help out there for so many people. It doesn't have to be like that, and I think that's the key to it. There's so much can be done with something that's relatively simple and, well, gentle, quite powerful, really, and you can do it yourself.
Thank you, Sean.
And Sean,
Thank you, Sean.
sorry.
Yeah.
Sean, what is your website for anybody that's interested in getting a copy of the book?
Yeah, I've got the. It's what I've done, Colleen, is I've sent some details. So
Yeah, I know you've sent some details, and they will be on the BCMA website. But just in case anybody wants to go and look.
Yeah, if you
for this.
It's www.confidenceontap.com.
And if you did want to,
sorry, I'm just writing that down. Could you say that again, please?
Yeah, it's www.confidenceontap.
Thank you.
.com.
Yeah.
And if you did want to buy the book, the code is student 50, so that you can get it at half price.
Yeah, if you get, especially probably the package is the best one to get. But yeah, you can get it for, if you just put in students 50, just one altogether, no break, you'll get it for 50% off.
And Sean, just as a matter of interest, what do you charge for a session?
I charge £45 for a session.
Okay, and less 20% for the people that were actually on this, on your webinar this evening.
You know, and the sessions normally last about an hour. And what I tended to do is, affirmations are a big part of it, and what I tend to do after, if you find it helpful, I do it on my iPhone actually. I send a recording, basically, of what you found helpful in the session, just to help you and talk you through the points really, to make a good start so you can do it yourself.
And where are you, Sean?
I live in Hampshire.
Thank you.
Oh, lovely. Whereabouts is it? Whereabouts? Do you mind me asking?
No, I live in Warsash.
Okay, lovely.
Southampton way.
Yeah. Okay, lovely.
By the sea. Lucky me.
So I think that brings us to the end of this evening's webinar. Thank you. Thank you everybody for coming along. It's been really lovely of you to be here. Expect an email from Tracy tomorrow with your CPD points, which I'm sure you'd be interested to have. And Sean, thank you very much for a really interesting presentation. Speaking for myself, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope I'm speaking for everybody else as well.
Yes.
Yes.